Well, hello students. This is Professor Levy, and I'm recording this video from my home office here in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. I'm making an effort today particularly to communicate to my American History 2 students, the honors class. I hope you don't feel neglected. A lot of my videos previously have been to the general student body, particularly a lot of sections in American History 1 and the Black Experience course, giving general instructions about what each class should be doing. But I'm recording this video especially for you to give you an update, and let me begin by saying how proud I am of all of you, both before spring break and before this coronavirus pandemic erupted. You were an excellent class, and you continue to demonstrate that quality of work that we expect of honor students, but I've come to know from you personally. So I congratulate you for that and encourage you to continue to do well. Now, for announcements as to what's coming up in our course, because there are some important deadlines and events that are coming up in the next couple of weeks, and I wanted to let you know where we stand, and at least what my plan is for how to proceed. So, as you know, we lost a week because of the coronavirus and the late start to the spring semester, and all of the campus courses were converted to online courses, and that was very disruptive for a lot of people, both students and faculty. But what we attempted to do in this class is to start with week 9. So last week was week 9 on the Great Depression, and this week you started to look at World War II. This is week 10 of our course, and most of you also submitted your discussion entries for this week, which I had a chance to read in grade. I'll comment on them, but let me say that this is where I really miss not being with you in our class, because this is a very relevant topic. We couldn't have predicted it at the beginning of the semester, but the New Deal, the Great Recession, a lot of the economic issues, and the proper response of government, if any, to these economic downturns is very relevant to what we're studying in our course in particular, and what many of us are living through. I've heard from some of you by email, Tyler, Derek, and Keith. I've reached out to Janine because we're really worried about her business with everything being shut down. I know that's affected her, and other students I know have had to work even more. Those who have been designated essential workers have had to work more than normal. And other students I've been hearing have been losing their jobs because so many stores and restaurants are closed. But as it relates to our class discussion, this was what I looked forward to most in our class. Students who work independently, often alone. But when we came together twice a week to discuss the issues, we had very engaging, lively, thoughtful class discussions around those issues. And this week, and last week in particular, is where I really looked forward to that and really wanted to do that. So as I'm looking at the camera now, I'm seeing in my mind's eye, we got Keith over here, we got Derek, who's doing his paper on FDR and a lot of the New Deal issues. And if you read his essay from last week on the New Deal, he offered a very thoughtful, astute critique of the New Deal, which we might expect. And if you read Keith's essay, which is almost in dialogue with Derek, with Ashley sitting in between both of them, as she normally does in class, but Keith also offered a very thoughtful yet critical view of FDR and his response, conceding that some of the New Deal measures did soften the blow of the economic impact of the Great Depression, but arguing that in long term it probably prolonged the Depression and created public dependence. So these are debatable issues, and I wish we could have debated and discussed them because they are so relevant. It was, I think, Ashley, I think, was the only student in last week's discussion who actually made the connection, though briefly, between the New Deal and what we're living through right now, in what has already been designated a recession, and we hope it doesn't become a depression like the 1930s, but certainly a lot of people are looking back to that. In that regard, and I'm going to announce a plan for us to actually meet next week virtually. There is a program in Blackboard that would allow us to see and hear each other, and so we could have a kind of virtual class here, and we could have Janine and Ben over there, Michael, and we could still kind of discuss these issues in our online environment. But I'm going to send you several articles, most of them from the New York Times, which I hope you've been reading regularly, of modern day economists and policymakers from different ideological points of view, and what they've been suggesting the United States should do now in this current lockdown, in this current first wave of a recession. And I think it's very interesting how we view our current dilemma and how people have been using history. A number of the articles and essays have been comparing presidential leadership during times of economic crises and comparing, say, for instance, President Trump to Franklin Delano Roosevelt, or that what Roosevelt did was wrong and he made mistakes. And if that is true, then we should not repeat those mistakes again in this economy. Although those who have been critical of Roosevelt and the Great Depression as a historical matter seems to me have been very quiet now in support of the stimulus package that Congress approved last week overwhelmingly, and the president signed it. So it seems like everyone is the FDR supporter now, although in history there's a raging debate that still goes on about the New Deal policies. But if there's any way that this could be discussed in our class, that's what I really want to do. So we'll do that next week, and I'll save your comments, and you'll read those essays, and we'll have a class discussion at least on that. I received some inquiries from students in your class about the status of our paper and the deadlines and how those dates may have changed because of the other changes in the course. And so this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to extend the deadline for your first drafts. Now, I assume that you've been working on this paper all along for over a month now, and we did approve your topics, and I know that you all had excellent sources to use during this period, and so you should maybe even be further ahead on your papers than you would be otherwise, since you don't have to come to class, and unfortunately some of you who are not working. But and again, I'm thinking about Janine. I don't know, but I know that all beauty parlors and barbershops are closed, so I assume that affects her as well. But on the bright side, that means that she can sit in her comfortable armchair with a nice cup of tea, reading David McCullough's excellent tale about the building of the Brooklyn Bridge. So if there's at least one saving grace perhaps to all of that, hopefully that's it. But for all of you, I'm going to give you an additional week to turn in your first draft of your papers. There is a folder in Blackboard under the research paper tab for you to deposit the first draft of your papers, and that will automatically be date and time stamped. There's also a rubric in terms of how it's going to be graded. I think you saw this rubric with your paper topic proposals, which was really overkill for a proposal, but it starts to become very relevant now in the first draft, and it's the same rubric for grading that I'll use in the final paper itself. So you could actually see those categories and think about how your draft will measure up in each of those categories. What I'm looking for in a draft, this is the most common questions that students have. What do you expect in a draft? Well, I don't expect perfection. What I expect is that first category of measure, which is substantial evidence of thorough research. So I should get a sense from reading the paper of how much research you've been doing, how rich the paper is going to be in detail and in analysis. I expect to see an indication of what your thesis or argument is going to be. So it's not necessary to have a thesis or argument when you choose your topic. You don't want to prejudge, prejudice to prejudge, but you have some questions that are motivating your interest, and then now that you've actually delved into it, that may or may not change, right? But you want to let the facts guide you, the information guide you, the evidence lead you to the conclusion that you ultimately reached, even if it were different from the one you started with. So that's called critical thinking, and that's called using logic and evidence to reach a conclusion. So I like to see that, that you do have a thesis or argument. What I'm least concerned with in the first draft is the quality of the writing. Right? So I assume that in the final draft it'll be well polished and you have, really corrected any grammatical mistakes or smoothed out sentences or rewritten passages to make them more engaging, more readable, more literary. That you do in the final steps of your paper. It's not even necessary to have complete footnotes and bibliography in the draft. If you use a kind of shorthand citation that I often use, which is just, I write the name of the author and maybe the page number, that's what people in psychology and sociology, anthropology actually call footnotes, which they're not. It's not a footnote if it's not at the foot of the page. It's just snugly parentheses with the citation. But I use that when I'm writing my drafts, and then later I'll create those into beautiful footnotes that will be at the end of the page. If your draft doesn't have your complete footnotes, you won't be penalized for that in the draft. But it is a good idea to have some notation so that when you do insert your full footnotes, you don't have to go back and try to find where you got that information. Okay? So it's very important to write it down while you're writing the paper, because going back later and trying to find a page, a quote, in many books and articles that you've read could be very time consuming and frustrating. So while you're writing, just make some note of where you got that information so that you can do a full footnote later. Of course, if you're using Zotero or one of those databases that I suggested, then it's doing all that for you, and so you could just drop your reference right in. But that will be due. I'll give you another week if you haven't done it already. I think a few of you have already deposited it. You can still revise it if you like, and everyone else has until next week to turn that in. Okay, now during week 11 or 12 we'll have another exam. We only had one formal exam in this course, and I said I was using your discussion entries as kind of like weekly quizzes, and you've been doing very well on those. But I do want to have another exam just for the purpose of your average and calculating that the average of those exams and the final exam, so one exam, a midterm, final exam, and then those weekly discussions, and your paper, of course. So, but we'll have another exam. But what I want to do is pause at the start of World War II. So I'll take a little extra time now, and I'm going to take that back so we still finish the course where we should be. I was originally going to spend 2 weeks on the civil rights movement. It's very important. I usually spend a lot of time on that. But this year, because of everything that's going on, I want to spend more time on the Great Depression, because I think that's relevant. These economic issues, very relevant. We have 2 people doing papers on economic issues and social responses. As we said, Derek is doing FDR. Keith is doing Great Society programs of Lyndon Johnson, but looking more philosophically at government responses as well. So I think this is very relevant, and I want to take that extra time to do that in class next week. So don't go ahead to World War II next week. We'll stay where we are. Use that extra time if you want to finish your paper, first draft of your papers. Stay where we are. Read the articles that I'm going to send you on what modern economists are saying. And in your discussion, if you have articles that you've been reading that you want to share with us, we'd be happy to read those as well. And we'll bring all those to our discussion next week. Please let me know if you're available at our regular class time, which is from 1 to 2:15 on Tuesday and Thursday. Let me know if it's possible to do this on Tuesday. If not on Tuesday, then possibly Thursday. And if you can't meet, let me know what the problem is and what alternative times may be, even if they're in the evening. So I'm going to try to find a time that's conducive to everyone in the class so that we can have a meeting next week. So let me know probably by email what your availability is, especially if it's not during our regular class time. Okay, the last announcement that I'll make relates to office hours. So some of you had been making very good use of my private office hours. We've had several meetings one-on-one, talk mostly about your paper, and I regret again that we haven't been able to do that since the campus has been closed. So what you can do is send me an email suggesting a time in which we could talk. It could be a virtual meeting where we can see and hear each other, or it could just be over the phone. But suggest a time and a phone number that I should call, and I'll try to work with you one-on-one and have a private meeting with you. So those office hours will be by appointment, and I'm here willing to help you and to make myself available at your convenience. Again, that could be evenings as well. So with that, I hope this more personal approach was beneficial, and I encourage you to remain focused, to remain dedicated. I realize that this has been a very challenging period for many of you, particularly those who have lost jobs, friends who have lost jobs, maybe family members who have fallen ill. And so it's very important in moments like this not to feel helpless. Although you may not have any control over the economy and you may not have any direct control over this virus, you do have control over something that is very important, and that is your academic success. This is something you still have control over, and you want to exercise that power that gives structure to your days. So get up every day, get dressed, live your life as if it has meaning and purpose and something to accomplish every day, and you'll continue to move forward. You'll feel better, and we'll all get through this together. Take care and be well.